Week 10 fantasy football, top 10 takeaways, instant reactions, breaking news, and the injuries you need to know about right here on Fantasy Points. Let's get it.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's going on? This is Theo Greminger for Fantasy Football Daily on Fantasy Points, talking about the top 10 takeaways of a wild Week 10. Really fun week for us in fantasy football. A lot of scoring, ton of scoring at the running back position, and we're going to start out by talking about it, and we've got to start with Jonathan Taylor. It feels like every single week on this show, on my other shows, on School of Scott, on Dynasty Life, in my articles, in my waiver wire articles, I'm talking about something Indianapolis Colts related because the Colts are red hot and on fire. And it's time that we had a discussion about Jonathan Taylor being the MVP of the NFL this year, period, at the running back position. Simply remarkable. This is like our fantasy football God King. This is the king of fantasy football. This is like the dream season for anybody who drafted Jonathan Taylor. Let's talk about that for a second. Jonathan Taylor, in some of the highest stakes drafts in the country, big FFPC drafts, big NFFC drafts, this guy was going at the 2-3 turn. You were getting Jonathan Taylor somewhere between like pick 18 and pick 25, and he's having one of the best seasons ever at the running back position, ever. And that's not hyperbole. Right now, Jonathan Taylor is averaging 27.4 points per game. This is the 8th most all-time for a running back ever in the history of fantasy football. You're talking about some truly elite players, some truly remarkable years to get to that north of 25 point per game mark. And yesterday in Berlin, anybody who woke up, watched the game, shout out to people on the West Coast watching the game at 6:30 in the morning. East Coasters, we loved it. 9:30 in the morning start, unbelievable. But Jonathan Taylor, 49.6 PPR points scored, 32 carries for 244 yards, and 3 rushing scores. The Colts win the game, a great game, a really fun game against against Atlanta. Taylor also gets 3 catches for 42 yards, and we'll talk about that very shortly. But Taylor now has 5 games played with 30-plus PPR points scored, and he's got 5 games played with 2-plus touchdowns. Taylor has 17 touchdowns on the year. Again, this is crazy. And let's talk about the pass catching, because this is Jonathan Taylor not only going absolutely insane as a runner, but this is his most proficient season ever as a pass catcher. He's on pace for 54 catches on the year. And when we go back to Jonathan Taylor's RB1 overall season a few years back, he had 40 catches that year. So he's on pace to get 54 catches. That's very solid at the running back position. I mean, when we go look at the end of the year at the counting stats at the running back spot, and we say, like, who's the leading receiver at the running back position, most of us are not going to think about Jonathan Taylor being there. But based on just how dominant he is, based on how efficient this offense is, and let's face it, how Taylor is sort of evolving as a player, prolonging his career with a more well-rounded game, the pass catching is just like a chef's kiss. It's icing on top. But Jonathan Taylor is the fantasy football God King, the usage monster, incredibly proficient. Everything is coming up perfectly for Jonathan Taylor managers. If you drafted him, you could have screwed up at a bunch of other positions and a bunch of other rounds, and you're still going to make your fantasy playoffs. So unbelievable for Jonathan Taylor. Let's stay in the same game, and let's talk about Drake London. So Drake London's season continues in Berlin, Germany. Drake London has 6 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. So Drake London is playing at a ridiculous level right now. This is his 4th game with 24 points or more scored in 5 games played. So 4 out of 5 games, he's had 24 points scored or more. He's the wide receiver 1 on week 10, and I'm recording this before Monday Night Football. So if something happens in Monday Night Football, Drake London, you still had a really, really good week. But it's time we talk about London. We talked about him last week a little bit, but now the drum beats are getting a little bit louder. This is a great year for elite wide receiver production. Jackson Smith-Njigba going absolutely nuts. Jamar Chase going nuts. Puka Nacua, terrific stuff. But Drake London is now averaging 19.8 points per game. He's a legitimate candidate to finish as the wide receiver 1 in points per game, period, on the season, based on this sort of usage. And he has a chance to be the wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season. Like, so from week 10 on, he has a chance to be the wide receiver 1. He's playing at just such a high level, and it's also the lack of teammate competition. 32% target share this past week, and no other wide receiver is involved. Darnell Mooney has back-to-back weeks with 1 catch. So Drake London's really like his only target competition in Atlanta right now is Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, and he's dominating those guys. This game was not great for Bijan in terms of being utilized as a pass catcher. I wanted to see a little bit more there, but it's Drake London. It's the Drake London show. Just terrific stuff. I mean, Bijan had 84 yards rushing, but you want to see Bijan with more than 2 receptions. Only 11 points for Bijan Robinson, a disappointing one there. He'll bounce back for sure. But you look at Atlanta and what they're having to do on offense. Back-to-back close losses to very, very good AFC teams. New England gets them last week in week 9. Indianapolis gets them this week in week 10. It eases up a little bit for Atlanta. They've got Carolina in Atlanta next week in week 11. New Orleans on the road in week 12. And then the Jets on the road in week 13. So 3 straight weeks where Atlanta has a chance to win games, and I think they're going to lean into Drake London about as much as possible. He's completely locked in right now as an elite wide receiver 1 asset for your fantasy team. Let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. So a funny thing has happened on the way to Miami simply just falling apart and laying down and just getting beat the rest of the season. Sort of a funny thing has happened here where maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago, everybody's like, Mike McDaniel, this is going to be the next coach that's going to get fired in the middle of the season. But gotta say, McDaniel bought himself some time here, considerable amount of time. And there's a chance that Mike McDaniel might survive this thing. 3-7 Dolphins. So again, this is, we're not hyping the Dolphins, but we have to hype what they were able to do yesterday. A huge win against the Buffalo Bills. Miami wins 30-13, and they got off to a ridiculous start in this one. This one was a 16-0 game at the half. So Buffalo had 0 points scored in the first half. Buffalo is reeling a little bit. We'll talk about these Bills. Bills apparently tried to trade a first-round pick for Jaylen Waddle at the trade deadline, but they offered a 2027 first. Miami wanted a 2026 first. Buffalo said, no thanks. And Jaylen Waddle goes on and has 5 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown yesterday against Buffalo. It really must have been disappointing for Buffalo Bills fans to see that sort of performance. But the story of the game was Devon Achane. Devon Achane going absolutely nuts. 22 carries for 174 yards and 2 touchdown runs. And then continues to fry his opponents. 6 catches for 51 yards. That's a 20% plus target share for Devon Achane in 5 out of 6 games played. This is a ridiculous total. I had JJ Zacharyson on this show last week on Fantasy Football Daily. If you missed it, go ahead and listen to it. We talked about Achane, we talked about London as second half of the year league winners, and they both went out and smoked people in fantasy leagues. But when it comes to Achane, it's the target share, where 20% target shares are rare this year at the running back position. We're talking about weekly 20% target shares. They're a rarity. They're not happening that often, but Achane is doing it every single week. He is a huge edge. Also, before the year, we heard about Devon Achane saying that he wanted to have 1,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards. One of his main goals was 1,000 rushing yards. He is going to destroy that number. Achane's been this electric, dominant fantasy asset for us over the last couple of years, but he doesn't have 1,000 rushing yard season. Now he has 780 rushing yards on the year. Achane is averaging 21.4 points per game. So there's a number of players that are elite assets at the running back position, but Achane is easily one of them. And just a quick note on these Bills, the first 4 weeks of the year for Buffalo, the first 4 games of the year, they scored 30 points in each game. Since then, this offense has been sputtering. 3 out of 4 games, Buffalo has scored, I think it's 3 out of their last 5. They have 20 points scored or fewer. So we remember the loss to Atlanta. We remember the loss to New England. Now the loss to Miami. Buffalo, we're not really used to seeing this, a Buffalo Bills offense sort of sputtering at this level. Let's stay in the AFC East. One team that is not sputtering, one team that is absolutely dominating this year, and just really the breakout team besides Indianapolis is the New England Patriots. New England, big game for them. Tampa Bay was coming out of a bye week. This was a game where it's in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay coming out of bye week. This is the kind of game that teams that are pretenders lose. And New England goes on and wins 28-3. Big win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay, there's some positivity there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the story of the game was really TreVeyon Henderson. And this has been a player that if you listen to fantasy football podcasts, if you're a fantasy football player, if you're reading fantasy articles, and if you're watching this show, you're looking to get an edge in fantasy, you're certainly not a casual. It's TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson was one of the most polarizing names of the first half of the year. Steamed up into the early 3rd round, late 2nd round in some leagues, and has been completely, utterly useless in multiple weeks of the year. And it's a frustrating thing for Henderson managers because it makes you question your whole process. New England using top 40 NFL draft capital on this electric back that we saw put up elite numbers multiple seasons at the highest level of college football with elite burst, with two-way ability, and you're like, this guy can't get on the field. Really, really tilting. It was almost a sharp squeeze. And I'll tell you this, there was a lot of really smart managers in high-stakes leagues, talking about high-stakes FFPC, high-stakes NFFC. And Theo, how can you say these guys are smart? Because you're talking about guys who have won hundreds of thousands of dollars in fantasy football over the years. Consistent winners were on TreVeyon Henderson this past offseason. I know I've got some TreVeyon Henderson bags. I even have an FFPC main event team that is somehow a 1 seed with the most points in the league, with most best record, most points in the league with TreVeyon Henderson. I've somehow been able to do that one despite taking him early 3rd because I also have Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jamar Chase and Drake May and a bunch of other really good picks on that team. But TreVeyon Henderson managers who have been able to sort of tread water here, get to in the playoffs, maybe 5 seed, 6 seed, 4 seed, despite making that pick for Henderson. And I see a lot of these people on X with these takes. Let's get something straight. Like, let's not get it twisted. If you make one bad pick and it's not your 1st round pick, if you make one bad pick in like the 3rd or 4th round, you're blaming your entire season on that player not producing, then you didn't draft well, period. So like that's your season is not destroyed by making one bad pick. There's the waiver wire, there's every other round. So I'm seeing a lot of like snarky people on X saying, "Oh, all these like 2-win TreVeyon Henderson teams are excited about." No, that's not the case. If you have 2 wins with TreVeyon Henderson, you didn't draft well in other rounds. You didn't hit the waiver wire. Tons of waiver wire hits this year. And make sure you're checking out my waiver wire show with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley every week here on Fantasy Football Daily Podcast and on Fantasy Points YouTube. But TreVeyon Henderson now, not to get on that diatribe, but I can't stand some of these takes of fantasy football is based on like one bad pick and you're done. No, that's loser mentality. But TreVeyon Henderson looks like a second half of the year player. We're never wrong. We're just early. 14 carries, 147 rushing yards, and 2 touchdown scores, including a 69-yard touchdown run that really iced the game. Again, New England's 8-2. TreVeyon Henderson looked like Jahmyr Gibbs yesterday, and that's not hyperbole. He looked like Jahmyr Gibbs. We wish he would be utilized more as a receiver, but New England was pretty much in control of this game. So I think we could see that. This week is another big potential Henderson game. The Patriots play Thursday night, which is awesome because it's an island game. It's a single game where we get to see Drake May and the Patriots in primetime in a game that they should really dominate against a reeling Jets team. Jets won, but Jets have issues right now. The Jets had played with some pride yesterday, but they have issues as a team. New England should put an absolute number up on Thursday. And fantasy managers with TreVeyon Henderson, start him again. Let's look for TreVeyon Henderson to have a huge second half of the year. At the very least, I think any week that Stevenson's not there, TreVeyon Henderson is a mid RB2 with upside in this offense. Looked explosive. Patriots are 8-2 on the year and about to go 9-2 after Thursday night. Staying in this same game, post-bye week, Emeka Egbuka, exactly what you want to see. So there's a little bit of fear and trepidation in the marketplace on Egbuka. Egbuka had 21 targets his previous 2 games heading into Tampa Bay's bye week. But the production was lacking for Egbuka in 3 straight weeks. And there was some like Emeka Egbuka haters, faders, doubters, and non-believers who were coming out of the woodwork on X. Usually it's people that didn't have any exposure to Emeka Egbuka, who were like, gave a little bit, see, I told you so moment. You should have sold high on Egbuka. You should have sold high on him. Look how smart we are. 3 straight weeks. But if you're a Fantasy Points listener, you're a viewer of this channel, you understand that usage, if the usage is there with a talented player, things are going to work themselves out. And when you factor in the quarterback throwing passes to Egbuka is Baker Mayfield, things are going to work themselves out. Emeka Egbuka had a really, really strong week. And the thing that makes me most excited is 13 targets. 13 targets coming out of the bye week. And then we get 6 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. 34 targets his last 3 games played. And Egbuka had a 30% target share here. No one can run the ball on New England. Sean Tucker had the most rushing yards of any back against New England this year. But Tampa Bay was able to pass the ball effectively. Tez Johnson, who we've talked about on this show so many times, on our waiver wire show so many times, another positive game for him. 2 touchdown catches. We're starting to see it there with Tez Johnson. A really big game from Cade Otton, who I think is a sneaky player that's trending over the second half of the year. Tampa Bay is going to be fine. They lose to New England, but they're going to be fine. They're 6-3 on the year. Very, very strong team, but New England is a really, really strong team right now. But it's Emeka Egbuka. We're very confident in him down the stretch. Treat him as a low-end wide receiver 1 rest of the season. Going over to LA, and let's talk about the absolute machine that is the LA Rams. LA beats San Francisco 42-26, and the story of the day is Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is on an absolutely historic run here. Stafford is simply playing ridiculous football. It's really one of Matthew Stafford's best seasons ever as a pro. And a lot of the production has been over the last 3 games played. But we got to talk about Stafford here. Stafford's 37 years old. He turns 38 in February. So this is supposed to be when you start to wind down as a player. But it's been anything but that. Matthew Stafford looks sort of ageless right now. 4 passing touchdowns against San Francisco, 13 passing touchdowns over his last 3 games played, and 0 interceptions. Stafford has had 3 touchdown passes or more in 5 out of his last 6 games played. LA's using a ton of heavy personnel, 12 personnel, using a lot of multiple tight end sets, in addition to Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua just being efficient, dominant beasts out there. Adams and Nacua continue to like dominate the combined target share and the production of the team. 11 catches for 141 yards and 2 touchdowns combined for Nakua and Adams. But the story, the wide receivers are fantastic in LA. But the story of the season has to be Matthew Stafford. Stafford has 25 touchdown passes and only 2 interceptions on the year. Insane. 25 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions on the season. He's had 2 41 touchdown pass seasons. So he's done it once in Detroit and he's done it once in LA. I mean, that's having 2 40 touchdown pass seasons is insane. Stafford's done it twice. Right now, he's on pace at 37 years old to have 47 touchdown passes on the year. He's on pace to have his best season ever in terms of touchdown passes. Stafford is completely locked in. We'll also mention Devontae Adams left the game with an oblique injury. So we're going to find out the status of this probably Monday, Tuesday. Make sure you're listening to all of our Fantasy Points podcasts. We'll cover all these injuries throughout the week. Devontae Adams would certainly be a huge loss if he misses any time, but we'll find out a little bit more about this one. It could have been a preventative thing, having him leave the game. We really won't know until we get a little bit of further news. LA is on fire. They're 7-2, and they have a chance this week to move to the top of the NFC West. They're going to play an awesome Seattle Seahawks team who just rolled Arizona yesterday. So you get the Rams and the Seahawks. That's got to be the game of the week this week. Seattle comes into LA here, and then LA gets Tampa Bay the following week. So they have 2 games, the next 2, against NFC playoff type teams. But we're looking for Matthew Stafford to keep it up. Despite the lack of rushing production whatsoever, he's a locked-in fantasy starter for you. Stafford is completely locked in. This offense is cooking. Let's stay in LA. And we're going to talk about the LA Chargers. And teams in LA are winning this year. Chargers improved to 7-3 on the year. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we have sort of a shift here. First of all, we'll talk about Omarion Hampton, who has no boot on. And there's positivity that Omarion Hampton is going to come back after LA's bye week. And I think he's going to come back with like a full workload. I think that they're playing it safe here. This is a team that has playoff aspirations. This is a team that wants to do a lot this year in LA. And what we're seeing from Kamani Vidal should give you nothing but positive vibes for Omarion Hampton. Hampton had everything rolling before he got injured. A bunch of really solid fantasy weeks where he's also catching the football. Then you've got Kamani Vidal being able to not only have some utility in this offense, but also put up some fantasy numbers in this offense. So I think that's a huge positive sign. There's been some takes out there that Kamani Vidal is going to cut into Omarion Hampton's usage. I don't buy it. I think Omarion Hampton, when he comes back, is going to be a locked-in, like low-end RB1 type. I'm really excited about that. You probably don't get that till week 13. So it's really like week 13, week 14, Omarion Hampton, and then you're in the fantasy playoffs. But Hampton's a player that can really affect fantasy playoff leagues. But the story is the pass catchers here in LA. And we have a player trending up, and we have a player trending down. Quentin Johnston led LA in routes run and targets. He had 10 targets. Was okay. Fewer than 10 PPR points, like 9+ PPR points. QJ, but the usage was solid. But the story of the day was Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey, 4 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets. Efficient monster. Ladd McConkey has had 14.9 PPR points or more in 5 out of 6 games played. McConkey's headed up. McConkey is locked in. He looks like the player we were drafting in the 3rd round this year. Keenan Allen is trending down. Keenan Allen, this is 3 straight weeks with Keenan Allen failing to put up fantasy numbers whatsoever. 2 catches for 19 yards for Keenan Allen. That's 3 straight games with 4 catches or fewer, and fewer than 50 receiving yards in all 3 of them. Keenan Allen is a guy that is really a bench player now. I don't think you can start him this week. Maybe down the stretch, you're going to be able to find some Keenan Allen. There is a window for Keenan Allen, though, to bounce back here. It's not one we want to talk about, but Oronde Gadsden left the game with a knee injury. He's getting an MRI on Monday. We're going to find out about what the state of this knee is. This would be catastrophic. Oronde Gadsden's been like a top 5 tight end scorer since he started his just amazing ascent up, from the waiver wire in a lot of leagues to being a player putting up huge numbers at the tight end position. We hope this is nothing. So the real takeaway here is Ladd McConkey trending up here. We've got Oronde Gadsden concerns. We've got Keenan Allen concerns. And we've got a light at the end of the tunnel with Omari and Hampton coming back after LA's bye week. So this LA offense, we've got faith in them. Justin Herbert playing at a very high level. Got faith in this LA offense. But this LA offense is changing over the course of the rest of the season. Look for McConkey to put up top 15 numbers every single week. Talking about a wide receiver who the season could be over for him. And I'm not really trying to throw this out there and speculate, but what's the point of playing Garrett Wilson the rest of the year on the 2-win Jets? And I know a shout out to Jets fans out there. I want to see the Jets win. I live on Long Island. The Jets won again against Cleveland yesterday. Second win of the year. They're still playing hard despite losing multiple players at the trade deadline. Sauce Gardner, Quentin Williams, both traded away. Jets beat Cleveland. Sort of what was it worth, New York Jets? I get it. You're trying to win. You're playing for pride. Aaron Glenn wants to win, etc. Will the Jets shut down Garrett Wilson, though? I think I would if I was running the Jets. It's a lost season. There's no hope for really anything this year except for pride. They can't pass the ball. They have quarterback issues galore. Garrett Wilson left the game. He re-injured the same knee that cost him 2 games played. Wilson is almost for sure going to miss Thursday night's game. And I think if he plays Thursday, it's nuts. But he's going to miss Thursday night's game against New England. But I think the chance for further re-aggravation, I would just shut it down if I was running the Jets. Let me know in the comments what you would do with Garrett Wilson. I get it. But at the end of the day, this is a long-term asset who's getting a ton of money. I would shut him down and play for 2026. The only thing working on New York right now is Breece Hall. Breece Hall is like a one-man gang. He had a 42-yard catch and run for a touchdown. He also had 21 carries for 83 yards. Breece Hall is this entire offense. And I'm rooting for the Jets to re-sign Breece Hall because if you're going to rebuild with probably a rookie signal caller or maybe a bridge quarterback or maybe they can pull off something like trading for Mac Jones. I mean, it could be Kyler Murray. It could be a number of these veterans we think are going to move teams this offseason in New York. Having Breece Hall there gives them their best chance of winning because Breece Hall is playing at a very, very high level right now. We're rooting for Breece Hall to get a contract. I think that there's a chance here that Breece Hall, if he doesn't re-sign for the Jets, and I think that's 50-50, then there's a chance that he's going to sign a monster contract somewhere, and this sort of proficiency and scoring is going to translate itself to a new team. He could be the next Saquon Barkley. And I don't want to get too hyped here. No, I'm not expecting a 2,000 rushing yard performance. But I do think it's a player that could leave New York, sign with a contending team, and put up huge numbers for somebody. We could go down the list of teams that need a running back this offseason. What would happen if you put Breece Hall in Chicago? What would happen if you put Breece Hall in Kansas City? How about Breece Hall in Arizona next year? I mean, we can go down the list. How about the Washington Commanders with a healthy Jaden Daniels and they sign Breece Hall? There's so many scenarios here where Breece Hall could take a massive step forward. I think if you're a dynasty manager, trading for Breece Hall makes a lot of sense. I mean, the past 2 weeks have been fantastic for him. 32 points against Cincinnati, 19.5 against Cleveland. But Breece Hall, I think, is trending up for 2026 in a major way. He's also, like Devon Achane, going to have his first 1,000 rushing yard performance of his career. Breece Hall playing at a very high level, but maybe they should shut down Garrett Wilson. Staying at the running back position, in week 9, Kyle Monangai went absolutely nuts. There was a lot of speculation out there, and I think really kind of stupid speculation, but you see a lot of kind of hot take people on X saying Kyle Monangai's performance against Cincinnati is going to make him be the starting running back over DeAndre Swift, sort of the Rico Dowdle corollary. But the thing is, DeAndre Swift was playing at a very high level, and the Bengals' rush defense is horrific. So if you take a step back and you kind of looked at it, you said, DeAndre Swift's going to be fine. And I think that's sort of where we were at. Most people here, I think almost everybody at Fantasy Points, certainly wasn't my colleagues making like these kind of takes. But if somebody was telling you Kyle Monangai was going to take over the backfield, why are you getting fantasy information from that person? This was a DeAndre Swift 1 week out. DeAndre Swift comes back and dominates the usage. Swift had 13 carries for 80 yards, and then he had 8 targets, had 5 catches for 18 yards. So he ends up with 18 touches. Kyle Monangai with 7. Okay, the Bears come back and win against the Giants. Caleb Williams, really, really strong stuff. 63 rushing yards and a touchdown. And he nearly had 2 rushing scores. One that he got tackled inside the 5 on another. 220 passing yards and a touchdown. No interceptions. Caleb Williams is the QB8 in points per game at the quarterback position heading into Monday Night Football. He's playing well. And I know that it's been a mixed bag with Caleb Williams. It's not every week. But at the end of the day, he's going to end up being a QB1 this season. The Ben Johnson effect is real. We saw what he did with Jared Goff in Detroit. He's doing it with Caleb Williams here in Chicago. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but there's going to be enough strong fantasy weeks for Caleb that he's going to be a QB1 on the season. Positive signs from Rome Odunze. 6 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. The 2 rookies, Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, combined for 106 receiving yards. But again, the story of the day, DeAndre Swift, that's the guy in Chicago. 18 touches, Kyle Monangai, only 7. DeAndre Swift sort of a locked-in mid-RB2 rest of the season. Swift has a chance to have his second best or maybe his best season ever in fantasy. He had an RB1 finish in Detroit back in 2021. I don't think he gets there, but I think his points per game average could be similar at the end of the year. The Ben Johnson effect is real. The Bears are 6-3, and they have a massive statement opportunity in Week 11 against Minnesota. They have a chance to go 7-3 and get a win against the Minnesota Vikings. If you recall, that was a very close Week 1 loss. Chicago, I think, really, really wants this one, and I think Chicago gets it. Chicago, again, can go to 7-3. They're looking like a playoff team, but the NFC North is absolutely loaded, and it still goes through Detroit. So President Trump goes to the Washington-Detroit game. Wild stuff. So the president's in the building, and this is a rematch of the NFC title game last year. Dan Campbell, we find out, takes over the play calling duties in Detroit. So John Morton has had some positivity this year, but also I think that Minnesota loss coming out of the bye week, Dan Campbell's like, nah, this is it. I got the play calling duties. So there's a huge crowd there. Again, it's Marcus Mariota behind center, so we have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Washington is very much heading in the wrong direction this year, but they still beat Detroit last year. Not an NFC champion, excuse me, I misspoke on that. This is the team that prevented Detroit from going to the NFC Championship game last year. So you get Washington. Washington ends up really, really getting hyped for this one, but it was for naught. I mean, Detroit is just so much better than them at this point. Absolutely destroyed them. 44-22. So Dan Campbell here called a perfect game. 546 total yards. This was a season high in production as an offense. 546 total yards. Absolutely nasty. Amon-Ra St. Brown catches a touchdown. Jamison Williams catches a touchdown. But the story of the day was Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs goes absolutely nuts. 3 touchdowns, 15 carries for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown as a receiver. David Montgomery still had 15 touches, but Gibbs dominated the fantasy numbers. Gibbs is completely locked in. The Lions are completely locked in. The Lions scored they scored on literally every single drive except for the last drive, which was sort of the white flag had been put up by the Commanders. Detroit statement game. This was if you beat Dan Campbell in the playoffs Dan Campbell is going to come back and slit your throat. That's just the way this guy is. Cutthroat, go get it. The Lions, the NFC North has a lot of tough teams. Green Bay is tough. You've got Chicago. Minnesota still is not bad. They lose to Baltimore. They're a mixed bag type team this year, but we still saw they're capable of pulling off some wins. They beat Detroit last week, but the division still runs through Detroit. Detroit, despite all these teams like LA, Seattle, Green Bay, Philadelphia, Detroit's still gonna have a say in the NFC playoffs. This is still a really, really good team. Dan Campbell is a really, really good coach and a really, really good play caller, because Detroit absolutely smokes Washington. Couple of quick hitters. We saw signs of life in New Orleans. Tyler Shuck had 2 touchdown passes. Alvin Kamara was not a zero. Looked a little bit better as a runner. And New Orleans beats Carolina 17-7. Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson both have touchdown grabs, which I think is interesting because both of these players are going to be sort of like PPR scam players the rest of the year. No Rashid Shaheed. It's going to be very consolidated between Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson. Dart gets knocked out of the New York-Chicago game. This is the 4th time Jaxson Dart has had an evaluation for concussion this year. The guy takes big hits. It's really like the only thing that we have to worry about with Dart, who's been just a monster in fantasy, is the guy takes big hits, and there's not a whole lot of help for him in New York. I don't think Dart will play this week. We'll see. And then the final thing to mention, probably should have started by talking about him. Trey McBride continues this just ridiculous domination. Seattle smokes Arizona, but Trey McBride, 9 catches, a season-high 127 receiving yards and a touchdown on 13 targets. 5 touchdown grabs over his last 4 games played. 61 catches on the season. And he's on track now for 115 catches on the year. Trey McBride looks like a league winner at the tight end spot, despite where you had to take him, because the connection with him and Jacoby Brissett is so good right now. So Trey McBride looks unbelievable. Make sure you are checking out all of my other podcasts here at Fantasy Points Podcast Network. I'm dropping 4 episodes a week here on Fantasy Football Daily. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe to the podcast feed as well. We have additional bonus content that doesn't always make it to YouTube. Check it out over there. And if you're listening to this show as a podcast, do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're the fastest growing YouTube channel in fantasy football for a reason. We're putting out videos that can help you win every single week. Check out the School of Scott podcast feed. Subscribe to that one as well. That's Scott Barrett and I every single week. And then Dynasty Life, my Dynasty podcast, dropping an episode every single week. Brett Whitefield and I are gonna record this week, and we're gonna unveil our way too early 2026 Dynasty rookie rankings. We're gonna talk about guys like Jeremiah Love, guys like Jordan Tyson. We're gonna talk about which quarterback, maybe a Fernando Mendoza. We're gonna talk about the players you need to keep an eye on in this 2026 class. And then I'm dropping the Waiver Wire show here with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley. Start Sit with Graham Barfield. You can read my articles over at fantasypoints.com. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.